Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Wayne Blue. You are listening to the Hello and Welcome program, which is a presentation of ToonieBet Online Sportsbook and Casino. This is what we're going to go with today. We are going to go around the internet and look at various mock drafts and take a look at who these experts have the Raptors taking with the 19th overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft. I think it's a good exercise to get a sense of sort of who's within that range at 19. Obviously, it's a pretty big one. It's, not in the lottery. And there is a decent range of players that these experts have picked on the Raptors, which you'll see in a second. But by far the consensus favorite, because there were several outlets that had the same player going to the Raptors, it was Bennett Stirtz, the guard out of Iowa. We can start with the ESPN one. But yeah, they have Bennett Stirtz going to the Raptors, the senior point guard out of Iowa. Measured okay at the combine. There's always a big discussion of like what they, what's their true height, quote unquote. He was listed at 6'4". He's really 6'2.5" without shoes. So closer to like a 6'3", maybe think like an IQ size guard. 186 pounds. Again, he was listed at 190. Everybody wants to get taller, stronger. Wingspan is 6'6", I think is solid. Again, like this is, if you picture the size of a guard, kind of like IQ. And the description here was that Sturz shot the ball extremely well in drills at the combine, plus measured and tested fairly well, helping himself overall. He has drawn interest inside the top 20, with teams hoping that this high-end shooting might give him the versatility to play off the ball. Though his shooting was streakier than anticipated at Iowa, only at 35.8% from three, he carried a heavy workload and was asked to create himself far more than he'll need to in the pros. His ability to navigate ball screens, limit mistakes, and knock down open shots gives him a path to useful bench minutes in the right situation, despite turning 23 in the fall. So, ESPN liked Sturtz for the Raptors. I think Yahoo also likes Sturtz for the Raptors, and a couple other different outlets. Let's see if you like Sturtz for the Raptors. So we actually have some film that we can show you. First one, this is probably one of his best games from last season. He managed to score 32 points in this one, but it was hyper efficient. I believe he only missed one shot in this, but you'll get a sense of what Sturtz is and his ability, especially as a shooter here. So what I like about Sturtz, especially having watched probably the most film on him, considering like this is sort of like the consensus, if there is one so far at 19, is his ability obviously to play the pick and rolls, is make reads. You see here that, because he's such a big threat as a shooter, oftentimes there's two guys that jump out at him. Doesn't really have like too complicated of reads and too flashy of passes. But I do find that like there's a real economy of like how quickly he gets to those decisions. Again, like as you can see here, there's like a high level of shot making that certainly I think has to be his main weapon no matter where he plays. But in college he was a very, very daring shot maker, one of the most in the entire league. And you could see his ability as a lead creator featured in his lone season in Iowa. Took them to a really nice, tournament run as well. A lot of huge moments there. But yeah, I mean, it's a skill set that the Raptors don't typically have too much of. I guess the closest comp you would say is maybe IQ, but I think Sturtz is a little bit more comfortable off the dribble shooting as compared to Emmanuel Quickley. Granted, of course, Quickley is definitely much better than him right now, having more experience and stuff. But, as you can see there, like the quick, tight crossover in and out, pullback, the balance and everything like that has been there. And this is the type of stuff that you just don't typically see. The on-ball creation for the Raptors offensively is a struggle. They play a lot, obviously, through Scotty. They play a lot through Brandon. They have their own ways as big forwards to get to their shots, especially in the mid-range. But when we're talking about from the top of the floor, above the three-point line, the ability to generate your own, the ability to cut and get open, depending if the spacing's right, get back door like he's doing right here. Those are the type of things that, I could see why prognosticators really like him as a fit on what the Raptors do. I think there's some concerns in terms of like, first and foremost, when you see a guy who's going to be 23 at the start of the season, that is a limiting factor. For me personally, I don't think that that should dissuade you from picking a player that you really like, because especially nowadays in the league, you see a lot of teams that have very productive players on the rookie scale contracts. The Raptors obviously had Colin Murray Boyles. You look at OKC, like half the roster is still on like rookie scale contracts, it feels like, or very, very cheap, like second contracts off the rookie deals. San Antonio has kind of the same deal. I mean, literally Wemby's still on his rookie contract, which is incredible. You need these kind of like lower end, like cheaper contributors who can be rotation players for you. And I also think that, look, if you're getting a guy in the first round, you're going to get him for 4 years. So you're getting him from age 23 to 27 at a very low number. I think that's already pretty good. That's most of your prime. And of course, if the player works out for you, you still have the ability to, extend that and essentially just create a high value contract for at least 4 years, and potentially even going into his second year or second contract as well. So, but again, like it depends on if you really like this format of player. I'm going to show you another player later on that, there's a lot of point guards in this draft, and Stirtz, I would not say is like a top 5 point guard in this draft, simply because of how much high end quality there is, especially in the lottery. You'll see lots of other guys get drafted ahead of him at his position. But I do like a lot of what he's done here. One thing that's really impressive too about researching him is his ability to sustain and be productive over like kind of ridiculous levels of minutes, to be honest. There were times in the tournament where, I mean, he played every single minute of the NCAA tournament, which alone is pretty impressive. But he had 19 games this past season with the full 40 minutes played. And yeah, I mean, that takes a lot out of you. I think that I've even heard in some interviews that, that in his own opinion, hurt a bit on his defensive end, because if you're going to do that much offensively and play that long, you're certainly going to be a guy that will need to pace yourself on the defensive end. And I'm, there is obviously a curiosity at 6'3", 6'4". Is he going to be able to defend at a high enough level to maintain your space on the floor and just be an overall positive? But I don't know. I can't really see him playing 40 minutes with the Raptors, especially anytime soon. And, you're hoping that translates to, an ability to be a little bit more disruptive on the defensive end. I think realistically, he's not going to be too much of a positive on the defensive end. Like, I just don't think he has the physicality and the tools for it. I mean, you're ultimately talking about like a decent athlete, but not like a exceptional athlete by any means. He makes some good reads. I would say, I mean, like he could be like an IQ level of defender to a certain degree, but yeah, ultimately you're drafting a player for the pick and roll ability, for the ability to make good reads, get to the basket, and at a type of player the Raptors don't have a lot of, especially from the younger guys. When you think about, this is a very different player than Jamal Shead, for example, at the backup point guard. It's even different from Chucky Hepburn, who the Raptors, by the way, are really high on. So I am actually really curious if they will ultimately draft another point guard who probably won't get that many minutes. I mean, at this point, this will be the 4th string point guard or 3rd string point guard. But still, I like this idea. And of course, if you draft a player like this, maybe you're able to make moves elsewhere in your roster to sort of balance it out. But for me personally, I actually do like Stirtz a lot. The tough shot making, which again, that was a pretty tough one. And even just the subtle stuff, like the ability to use ball fakes, to create gaps and angles, to drive. There's a lot of that from him that I think are really clever. And it really shows a player with confidence and experience, which, is something you would expect out of a senior. But I do think that it's not a given with younger guys that they're going to eventually develop this level of poise. So Stirtz is the first guy. And again, like a lot of the mock drafts, like the Raptors taking Stirtz. Let's look at the next player. The Athletic. The Athletic is probably, for me, Sam Vecenie's, the number one draft guy out there at the moment. And obviously a friend of the program has come on many times. Hopefully we're able to get Sam again in the future to get his, expert insight into this. For me, I'm just like most of you guys, I'm watching the YouTube videos and Trying to evaluate a little bit based off of that. But this is just my general impression versus somebody who follows him very closely. But nevertheless, Vecini over at The Athletic has the Raptors taking Jayden Quaintance, the 6'10", 18-year-old big man out of Kentucky. So Quaintance only played in 4 games this year as he attempted to return early from a torn ACL that he suffered late last season. Looked like a potential defensive anchor for a Kentucky team that desperately needed one on the interior and played really well in the team's win over St. John in his first game back. His mobility and defensive instincts jumped off the page when he was a 17-year-old at Arizona State and made the Big 12 all-defensive team while averaging 1.1 steals and 2.6 blocks per game. Projected Quaintance is a fool's errand until we get more answers at the combine on his medicals and whether he can make a full comeback by the time the NBA season starts. If you were fully healthy, I do think that he could be the 10th pick in this class, as he reminds me a lot of Robert Williams III, who made an all-defensive team for the Boston Celtics. But his range is extremely wide for Quaintance. He'd fit in nicely with the Raptors' decision to go all in on mobile defenders with high-level defensive IQ. So, man, I think the thing with Quaintance is just, you'll see it. It's a bit, he's definitely a little bit raw. More than a little bit raw. And I think part of that is his experience. Part of that is just, his current skill set at the moment. He obviously is much younger. But I don't know. There is something about him that you'll see here. We'll pull up the video. It does immediately jump off the page in terms of what he can do. So this is a game that he played as a freshman. So offensively, he starts off with a little push shot, whatever. Clearly you could tell that that's not his experience. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to the explosiveness. That ability to rotate over and block shots. That one, he helps in the lane and then gets back to his man in the corner and just absolutely denies and swallows up a corner 3 as well. He has the ups on the defensive end, the quickness, the explosiveness, exactly kind of what you would want out of a help defender. And that's, the main reason why he got so many steals and so many blocks. Offensively, he's not going to typically give you what he gave you here, which was 20 points. As you can see, he's mostly cutting back door and getting a couple plays at the basket. But it's his length and it's his ability to just be everywhere on the defensive end, I think is going to be really useful for him at the next level. One thing too is just for a lot of these players, they kind of need to jump to make plays. He actually does an incredible job of staying down on his feet and sometimes just straight up using his length to contest and block, knowing that that's sufficient. I do wonder at the next level if he's going to be able to do that as much, considering there's just much more size and better skill. But he's not one of those guys that has to gamble all the time for blocks and steals and stuff like that. As you can see there too, one thing you notice a lot from him, and I'll pull up another video here, but there's actually, for a guy who is able to move his feet and is really quick as a big, he actually does a really good job of being able to, stay with perimeter players. But he also has this and maybe this is something that he can get coached out of eventually. Again, we're talking about a really raw player here, but he actually loves this play where he allows guys to get by him, then he meets them at the rim as a recovery. It's not something that I would say is the best defensive thing, because it really does commit you to making that level of recovery. But of course, he's a guy who's confident enough to do it. Actually, at certain times you see Scotty do it too, where he temporarily and almost willingly allows the blow by to a certain edge, and then meets them at the basket, knowing that he's taller and stronger, and he's almost baiting them into those types of plays. But yeah, as you can see, he's got a very strong body. Weirdly enough, it feels like his body is very narrow, and his legs and arms kind of juts out. So I do think he gets pushed out of position a decent amount. I actually think I would love to see him get even stronger than what he showed for the first 2 years in college. And again, he's only 18, so he certainly has a lot to go continue building on. But again, offensively, he's not going to be much of a contributor beyond offensive rebounds and lobs. I think that's pretty clear. Maybe some cuts, but the one thing I do like is that he seems to be able to finish with both his left and the right hand. And we're not talking about super creative finishes, but around the basket and stuff, he's not always having to force it to one hand. If anything, he actually seems to love his left hand a lot, watching it so far. But yeah, it's just the shot blocking and the ability to protect the basket. Clearly an NBA level athlete, clearly has that size. And even though he's definitely not the size of a traditional center, but you could see him, being a guy who could obviously play small ball five, switch, and the idea of like pairing him, I don't know how it would work offensively because that will be a real mess in terms of spacing and ability to navigate space in the paint. But you put him, Scotty, and CMB in any sort of combination together, I think that will be really tough. Big question with him, obviously, will be the medicals. Like, is he going to be able to actually physically play? I mean, yeah. Okay, that's like a 3UC in a pickup league, but I'm happy that he has some level of touch to occasionally hit one here or there. But, yeah, the big question will be his medicals. And from what I understand, he didn't actually do the athletic testing at the combine, but he actually still did like other parts of the combine. So I guess, I don't know. It's we just don't have like his official measurements and stuff like that. But I think that that's not really the concern with him. The bigger concern is like whether or not he's able to actually play and be healthy. If you want to go best case scenario, you could say that this is a little bit similar to when the Raptors took OG coming out of his 2 years at Indiana. I mean, OG played more in his second year than Quaintance did here. And obviously OG, I mean, it doesn't all work out as well as OG did because OG managed to be able to play right away as a rookie, which I'm not entirely sure if that's really the same case here. But yeah, like that's kind of the best case scenario. And of course, the Raptors really do trust their medical staff. And, they trust the ability for guys to be able to stay productive and extend their careers in certain ways. Obviously, we just saw that what happened with Brandon Ingram. His issue wasn't nearly, and his injury wasn't nearly as bad as what happened to Quaintance. But I'm gonna cut off this video to show you just the stuff that he did at the draft combine. And the first dunk there is him going between the legs for a windmill. So clearly the guy could still jump and move, and the surgery, at least based off of some of these plays, it is not really hurting him too much there. He does have one thing too, is like, if you're really looking at the offense, he does have a little bit of a handle. What I like about it isn't that he's like, tricking people out or doing like, sham gods or anything like that, but he does keep that thing low and tight for a guy who is like a big man. And yeah, I mean, certainly this guy can really dunk, man. Oh my goodness. Like, he honestly, depending on if he's healthy enough, he would be a guy that I would actually like to see in a dunk contest one day. But yeah, one-handed dunks, two-handed dunks, still has his explosiveness. I don't necessarily care too much about the measurements. I just really want to know if he's like physically healthy and capable. By the way, one thing I neglected to say is that the Raptors actually already had worked out Bennett Stirtz, versus I haven't actually heard anything about them bringing Quaintance in. Of course, if you bring a guy into your workouts and stuff like that, that would certainly help your evaluation. And to a general degree, most teams will get the medicals, unless, a specific camp wants to keep you from drafting that level of player. But at least, I don't know, at least watching it here, he looks relatively healthy, and it doesn't look like a player to me that, I mean, if you didn't know he had knee surgery, he's certainly not playing like he's had knee surgery. One of the concerns is like, is he going to lose some athleticism? His game is very predicated on athleticism. So far it looks okay. And honestly, I got to say, the 3-point shot does look smoother as compared to when he was a freshman versus now as a player going into the draft. But also, I am a little bit mesmerized by the athleticism. I mean, like, come on now. Like, you watch this and you're just like, yeah, this level of athlete, you could see it being in the NBA for sure. I mean, we're talking about like, he just did a two-handed dunk from the dotted circle. This is actually an incredible dunk reel, all things considered. I don't know if he will be there ultimately at 19. I think it will probably require a level of, maybe a team's not being confident in his health. And the fit can be a little bit awkward, but if we're just talking about real like raw talent and ability, especially on the defensive end, again, he was special. And when the year he was healthy, 1.1 steals, 2.6 blocks, only play, I think, like 26 minutes a game too. So it was like a ridiculous amount of defensive production. He also rebounds the hell out of the ball too, which I think is also very important to mention. I think that I would understand any team really rolling the dice on him past the lottery, just based on his ability. Next one, I'm going to go to CBS Sports, and they had the Raptors taking Christian Anderson, the Texas Tech sophomore guard. So, yeah, here we go. Christian Anderson. Anderson's a highly skilled lead guard who is a big-time shooter and pick-and-roll maestro. There are questions about how he'll adapt to physicality and the defensive aspect, but his offense is worth betting on, especially for a Toronto team that lacks comparable skill at point. So very similar to why a lot of mock drafts like the Raptors taking Bennett Stirtz. They like the Raptors taking Christian Anderson as well. Both Sturtz and Anderson tested incredibly at the combine in terms of the shooting drills. That's stuff that you would really expect him to be doing well, because as you'll see here, Christian Anderson is a guard who very, very electric as a pick and roll player. Certainly is a guy who will be pulling up for three a lot, and that in the pick and roll is going to open up a lot of the rest of his game. Just going to share his video here. This is a game that he played against Baylor. I'm going to show you a game against Baylor and a game against Duke. I feel like the top end competition, I think, is the more premium programs are probably the best sense of what he could do versus like, showing you. Because the weird thing with college is like you'll see them playing some like random teams. You're just like, I don't know. Like, okay, you had 32 points against like, I don't know, just some random like tiny colleges and shit like that. That doesn't move me in the way that if you played well against Baylor and Duke. So yeah, here you go. There's Anderson with the ball. So as you can see right away, like small, wiry, and not particularly big as a point guard. I would say that just eyeballing, he looks a little bit smaller than Sturtz to me. Obviously he's much younger. He's a sophomore. Sturtz is a senior. But just a pretty small, wiry type of guard. And a lot of his game is predicated on the ability to pull up. He's a sensational pull-up shooter, man. Like, he really is an excellent pull-up shooter. He has the ball fakes. He has the up fake there, draws the closeout, attacks it, still ends up pulling up from above the three. And I think mechanics are beautiful. The way the shot goes up is beautiful. I don't know how much of a difference there is between him and Sturtz. Anderson did shoot a better percentage and made more threes. But I would say functionally that they're like relatively same level of shooters, especially as college players coming out. The one thing I would say for Anderson is that he doesn't really feel like he has as much of an in-between game as Sturtz does. He has some. He's able to drive to the basket. He does take some contact, and he's actually able to really use his speed and his athleticism to like leverage that against closeouts and be able to make plays. But yeah, I do again see the vision of sort of like what the Raptors are missing a little bit here. He's not as much of a downhill threat. Again, like I could see him shying away from contact in certain plays. Sometimes it'll be dependent on the whistle. But again, like you look at the shot making, it's impressive. It's more than impressive. He was like genuinely one of the best 3-point shooters in college last season. And, in addition to that, he paired it with like some pretty good playmaking as well. But more than anything else, it's if you can hit pull-up threes like this at an NBA level, he'll be quite a good guard. And, that it's tough to reduce it only down to that, but he has that ability. If I had to say, he gives me a little bit of like Lou Williams vibes. Like it does feel like, he's using the dribble mostly to sort of set up that ability to pull up from three. Obviously, Lou was incredible at that. And he turned himself into one of the best six-men in NBA history, making a career off of that, but was never really a strong defender. But again, like that is a valuable skill set, and there's something that the Raptors don't necessarily have. I'm going to show you another video, but I mean, most of these ones, they do look relatively similar in the sense that, we kind of get a sense of what Anderson is. He's, I guess maybe a score-first point guard. Again, that's a little bit similar to Sturtz, too. Sturtz is a score-first point guard as well. I mean, if anything, Anderson actually averaged more assists. But, this level of player that, and looking at the draft, there actually were a number of these, like, really, really impressive point guards that came out and created a lot of their own offense. As you see here from Anderson, pretty much everything is, like, off the dribble and stuff. But, there's actually a number of these type of point guards in this year's draft. And I do wonder, when was the last time we had a draft with that many like strong point guards coming out in 1 year? I'm thinking about maybe, I guess like the draft with Curry and Rubio and Ty Lawson, like, that was a pretty strong draft for point guards. I'm thinking about like I don't know. I guess even the CP3 Darren Williams year. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody nearly to the level like Curry, CP3, Darren Williams, that type of player. But there just seems to be like a handful of really, really impressive guards in his draft class. And Anderson's one of them. Like, again, that's not an easy move at all. Hard drive to the left, snatch back, crossover, pull up three, well behind the line over a bigger defender. That's not easy to do. And this is something that you've seen him repeat at a high level, throughout his collegiate career. And he's only played 2 years, but like, it's not an accident when you keep hitting shots like this. Like, this is ridiculous, man. And this is against Duke. You know what I mean? Like, this is against a fantastic team. There's him going against Boozer for an and one. Like, that those are all really, really impressive pieces to have. I would say that maybe between him and Stirtz, I think that, like, even though I did comp Stirtz a little bit to IQ, it feels like Anderson's like probably a little bit closer to IQ for me. The thing with IQ is just like, I think he could be that good of a pull-up three-point shooter, but he just doesn't shoot the pull-up as much as you may want. And for a team like the Raptors that just genuinely doesn't have that many off-the-dribble perimeter players, you would have wanted to see more of that from IQ himself. But yeah, that's Christian Anderson. I think, again, the vision there makes a lot of sense. Lastly, the last of the four guys I'll show you now is Alan Graves. And I'm going to go to a very throwback website, NBADraft.net. Okay. I'm sorry. Honestly, like when you had like 4 mock drafts saying that the Raptors should take Bennett Stirtz, it wasn't a particularly interesting conversation. So, NBADraft.net, which is like just an absolute throwback. Like I adore this site in a way that only basketball nerds can. The interface looks like it was written in 2009. It has these there's just something so retro about the whole thing, but it's actually updated all the time. And they actually have scouts, and they write like pretty in-depth scouting reports. So I'm really not like knocking the product at all. I actually really enjoyed this website. But yeah, they had the Raptors taking Alan Graves at 19. He's a 6'9", 226-pound power forward out of Santa Clara. He was a freshman, redshirted his first year. And interesting thing, I mean, this is now we're living the NIL era, but he's both declared for the NBA draft and also the transfer portal, which means that it does seem to me if he doesn't get drafted high enough, he could just doesn't get enough assurances to get drafted high enough during the draft process. He could also just elect to go back to college and make a ton of money. There's like big teams like, Michigan, reigning champs, Kentucky, like there's programs like that are looking at him. But yeah, I mean, here's part of, wow, I mean, a very long write up here, but kind of the NBA comparison that they gave here was Boris Diaw / Kyle Anderson, which gives you a sense of like that bigger, slower playmaking level 4. So the strengths here, Graves is a versatile 6'8", 6'9" forward with a well-rounded modern skill set and a strong statistical profile. That's, I think, the biggest thing with him is his statistical profile is really great. Former point guard who hit a late growth spurt, brings advanced ball skills and uncommon feel for his size, comfortable handling in the open floor and initiating offense in spurts, showing composure and control with the ball. He's an excellent passer as a front court player, sees the floor well, makes quick, unselfish decisions as a connector. I think the bigger thing, too, is on the defensive end, strong positional defender with the ability to guard multiple spots, uses length, instincts, and timing to generate plays defensively, average 2 steals and 0.9 blocks per game, and impacted passing lanes. And he rebounds decently for his position, and it contributes across the board, but largely as a high IQ player. So I think the thing with him, too, is you kind of have to watch the film because he actually looks... He could be a little bit, I don't know. I'm really, this is a more hit or miss for me, to be honest, because he did come off the bench for all but 4 games in his season. And like Santa Clara did have a really good team, probably one of the better teams in the last decade. But, we are still talking about a guy who came off the bench. It's not that uncommon, I suppose. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, 19th pick, taking a guy off the bench. Why did he come off the bench that much? The 4 games he started, I even looked into it. It wasn't even like, oh, he like built and got stronger and he ended up starting towards the end. He actually started most of those in the first 2 months of his college season. So I guess the coach has basically decided like we're gonna play him off the bench. From what I understand, they had like a 7'1" center. And obviously I'm not following Santa Clara that closely, but like they had a center and they played Graves largely at the 5, and so I don't think they were gonna play him over a 7-footer. So they played the older, more experienced, bigger player, and they used him largely as a backup. I mean, he played. Like it's not like he didn't play. Like like there's sometimes when you deal with college, like you see players that like ultimately just don't play that many minutes. He did play a lot of minutes, and the big thing with him is that he averaged for just 22.6 minutes per game. He averaged 12 points, got 6.5 rebounds, and again the 1.9 steals and 0.9 blocks in 23 minutes of play is actually like a really really high level of defensive production. And on top of that, he shot 51% from the field and also 41% from 3. So you're looking at a player that has a lot of the components that, at least on paper, statistically, a lot of the components that would fit really well in the modern NBA. Kind of a bit of a positionless player. And, even to his own account, I was listening to some of the interviews he did. He was comparing himself to like, he really liked watching Nas Reed and studying his game. That type of like, very unique, rare player. Now, granted, when I watch the film, I'm not exactly seeing Nas Reed, but he's an interesting player. Like I think that it's a guy I want to dig a little bit more into, because he is a player that like it fits a lot of what the Raptors like. If the Raptors took Allen Graves at 19, and Bobby's sitting at the podium afterwards, I could see him sitting down, chuckling a little bit, and saying, "Yeah, this is the type of player we like. This fits the profile of players we have success drafting and developing in previous years." And he might point to like Scotty, CMB, OG, Pascal. The one thing that I would say definitively before we even start watching this is I understand that he is just not that level of athlete. OG, Pascal, Scotty, CMB. Even you want to throw Precious into this Vision 6'9" thing, even though the Raptors didn't draft him. Those guys were all excellent athletes to whatever degree. I'm not even talking about like, I mean, it's not debatable to me how great of athletes they are. Allen Graves, I mean, you'll see in the video, but he moves like at his own pace, real slow, right? So here's him at the top of the floor, knocking down a pick and pop 3. That's a lot of his offense, is that ability to pick and pop. Here, once again, going for the pick and pop against a drop. I think there's a big advantage for bigs playing the 5. If they have the skill, if there are 4 playing the 5, it really does accentuate a lot of your abilities and almost in a way makes you look a little bit better than you are. I would call that a bit of like the Mamu effect, because that kind of what happened with Mamu this season is he's a 4 and he ultimately had to play a lot of the 5 because then the Raptors had a lot of injuries, and obviously Yak was out for a lot of the year. And so he got to play a lot of 5, and especially in Darko's system, the 5 touches the ball a lot, makes a lot of decisions. And if you're able to space the floor and shoot from the 3, against most bigs who are dropping, you're able to either hit the 3 or attack closeouts. Now, granted, Mamu was actually very good at attacking closeouts. Probably the best thing that he did was attacking closeouts. But yeah, as you can see here, like Graves benefits a little bit to the similar effect in terms of as a 4 playing as a 5. Now, because he has a 3-point touch, he did shoot 40%, on like 2.5 attempts. A decent number, especially for a guy coming off the bench. That's a decent number of attempts. He's not exactly turning them down. This is some of his work in the post. As you can see, he really does move in his own speed and in his own direction. I have to say, by the way, watching college, especially watching some of these like plays here, there's a real dissonance between like, oh yeah, I'm watching like Thunder Spurs and like guys are flying around, there's no space, and there's freaks all up and down the floor with their athleticism and their size and their skill and their ability. And then I watch college and I'm like, there's just some random teams like San Diego, what? And they're playing this like little high school zone. It's like 2 entirely different levels of sport. But yeah, Graves has, look, he's not really exactly dunking the ball much, right? Like, he's mostly around the paint, finding little gaps in his zone coverage, and he's taking his time, couple dribbles. Again, I don't know why there's no double teams coming to him, but he's getting little jump hooks and floaters. He's more or less fine with them. He seems like he can finish with both hands, although prefers the right. And he has that ability to like make some decent level of like paint scoring. I do wonder how much of this translates to the NBA. So at the combine, he measured out to like 6'7", 6'7.5", without shoes. So he's closer to a 6'9" player, and he does have a plus wingspan at 7 feet, but it's not like so big. So I can only anticipate him maybe posting up like mismatches when he has a guard on him versus like what you're seeing here. And I would love to see him get stronger. I mean, obviously he's a freshman, so there's a lot for him to get to, but I'd love to see him get stronger. And sometimes he doesn't even necessarily get to the spots as easily as he wants to. Now, granted, he seems to have decent touch, so, that negates that ability. Like right there, he doesn't have to get all the way to the basket because he's shooting a jump hook, because he already feels comfortable shooting, well outside of that arc. But yeah, I mean, he's got good touch. And he plays, I think, really within himself. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of these plays where he's like really attacking one-on-one and forcing it and dunking over two guys. Like he is a willing passer as well. And that's part of his appeal. I think that's what made him a little bit more efficient as well, is that, he has this ability to handle it a little bit, again, because of his past history as a point guard, shoot a little bit, post up occasionally, and more than anything else, just slot in. Offensive, I thought he was, looking at the tape, like played well within his role, and didn't really play like a feature guy. Which I mean, like again, he's a freshman coming off the bench. How much are you really going to be featured in that same way? I would rather you play within the context of the team. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I think more than anything else, it's the defensive ability that I think is really intriguing. One thing I like about him is that he does stay really light on his feet, and he does really seem to have things measured out really well. Like he's not, what I mean? He's not like swatting it into the second row or anything like that. He's just like really timing it well and like getting to it with his reach, staying down long enough, and then using his length to make plays. Seems like a pretty high IQ player. And again, when you have comps like Boris Diaw, for example. I know Boris wasn't like, some sort of groundbreaking defensive player, but Boris was definitely a very, very smart player, one of the smartest bigs of his era. And yeah, I think with Graves here, you're seeing his ability to sort of stay on his feet. He looks like a bigger wing, honestly, when he's like playing defense rather than sort of as a big. He's certainly not an intimidating big, but he times it well. Has the good length to contest. He's not really blocking too many shots above the rim. So one guy I seen him talk about in terms of like guys he's studying was Al Horford, which I thought was kind of interesting because this does remind me in a way of sort of how Horford was. Now, granted, Horford, I would say much stronger, even in the college level. Obviously, Horford was, excellent in college, back-to-back champions at Florida, on that team with Joakim Noah and Corey Brewer. But like, I could see a little bit of that Horford-esque quality to him, where Horford is not exactly like jumping above the rim and blocking shots that way, but he's still able to move his feet, still really strong with his huge chest, and he's able to like, actually do a good job against guys like Embiid and Giannis. I don't really see that level from Graves, at least right now. His body looks to be much like slimmer. He looks much more like a wing. As compared to Horford, who was clearly able to be versatile as a 4 and eventually as a 5, but was a bigger player. But yeah, I mean, like I think it's a lot of like, if you really like the analytical profile of Graves and you really study the film and you're okay with him playing against like relatively lower tier competition at times, then yeah, I think that there's a lot to like about him. And it feels like I'm giving him a backhand compliment, but I'm not. Like I think that like ultimately when you're talking about a guy who doesn't have the body of work that some of the other players in this potential range, you kind of have to sort of go, with your level of confidence and with your level of scouting and with your level of like being able to project a player. There's certainly a lot here that like, you could see him being a good rotation player for a lot of playoff teams. Like the Cavs could use a guy like this. The Knicks could use a guy like this. I think even to a lesser degree that the Spurs could use a guy like this because they just don't have a lot of 4s. But nevertheless, like, these Graves is an interesting prospect. And since there's not too much known about him right now, and honestly, there might be a chance that he ends up going back to college instead of coming out and staying in the draft. It's a bit of a wild card. I do feel like, he probably out of all 3 of them most likely to be there. at 19, and I could really see the Raptors taking a heavy look into him, considering he does fit the profile of a lot of what they like to do, and typically the type of players that they're confident in drafting and developing within their own program. But that's the four that are most commonly linked to the Raptors at this moment. Of course, there's other names to look for as well. I've been really starting to like lock in and just get a good sense of like who these guys are. And there's other players that I'm quietly hoping to drop to the Raptors. Damar, of course, LeBaron Philon, really love his game. There's other potential guards. We looked at two of them, Christian Anderson and Bennett Stirtz, but Ibuka, Okori, I think, is another guy that has drawn some level of interest. Certainly a different profile than both Christian Anderson and Bennett Stirtz. But for me, like, I think, I'm pivoting over to this because I want to talk about which of these guys I would really, really feel confident in the Raptors taking in 19. But first, I want to let you guys know that, this next segment is a presentation of the Triple Double Crunch Wrap by Taco Bell, which absolutely lives up to the name. Double the protein, triple the layers, zero messing around. It's one of Taco Bell's most stacked menu items. If you're actually hungry after a workout, late game, long day, this is the type of order that really fills you up. And it's handheld wrapped, doesn't fall apart, no fork, no plate, no distraction from the screen. Soft on the outside, crunchy on the inside. It's got that contrast that makes every bite hit, which honestly is what you want when you're stress eating during a close game, when you're locking in for these playoff games that are so intense. Oftentimes I find myself wondering, why don't I have a triple double crunch wrap in my hand for some of these games? You could try it today at your nearest Taco Bell. So having talked about these four guys, I want to let you guys know about which guy I want a triple down on for the Raptors at 19 and which guy I want a double down on the Raptors at 19. So the four we looked at today, again, Bennett Stirtz, Jayden Quaintance, Christian Anderson, and Alan Graves. So to be honest, the guy I would triple down on, especially if the Raptors get a chance to like work them out and get a real sense of comfort in their ability to play, would actually be Jayden Quaintance. I know that the fit, and you might even say the skill set, like it's raw, and he's definitely he can contribute in certain contexts for sure, but ultimately, you might have to say that like this is a guy you have to look at a little bit more long term. But I do feel like the athleticism, if you're able to confidently say that, all the things are behind him and that he's able to physically go and he's able to hold up, and you look at the scans and the medicals and everything's okay. If you got a chance to take a player like that at 19, that he looks like, honestly, like lottery level talent to me. I think you're looking at a freakish athlete with actually pretty good timing and defensive instincts, rebounds the ball like crazy. I do think that like there is probably a low chance of him actually being there. And if he does slide, is actually probably a bad sign, with respect to his health, which is the biggest question mark. Or maybe even just his like ability to, translate on offensive end, because he definitely will be a negative for a long time there until he gets, more skilled. But man, I'm watching him, especially watching some of the combine stuff. It just absolutely pops. And hopefully, if the Raptors are able to get him in a workout, get a sense of, their medical team, which obviously is fantastic, led by Alex McKechnie and company. If they feel comfortable with it physically and he's, there at 19, I would triple down. I wouldn't be mad at them. I think it's a bit of a pure talent swing, but I think the talent is just at a different level as compared to the other four that we looked at there. I think more realistically, the guy I would double down on is Bennett Stirtz. Again, like I actually don't mind the age. I don't like 23 going into his first year. It's fine. The Raptors are in a position where they're trying to be in the playoffs. They're trying to grow in the playoffs. They might even use the 19th pick to trade, for a more immediate player, or they might trade up and down the draft. Who knows? Obviously, a lot of options, but like I don't mind that if they ultimately use the 19th pick, that they took on a guy like Sturtz. I think it addresses an area of weakness for them, which is perimeter playmaking. Gives you potentially flexibility. If he works out, then maybe you're actually able to make moves around the perimeter. I think this year in the playoffs, especially with IQ being out with his hamstring injury and missing all 7 of the games, like it was not ideal that the Raptors had to run so much point guard through Jamal Shed, so much point guard through RJ. I think Point Scotty is good too, but like ultimately you would actually like to have a player to go alongside of him that can, do a lot of the ball handling capabilities. I think Sturtz, showed up physically, mentally. I think his leadership was also a pretty big factor too. His toughness in a lot of those tournament games, that does sway me and that does impact me. It's not just like, oh, I watched the tournament and therefore I fell in love with a guy. It's not that. It's the fact that under pressure, like he seemed unfazed to me. And so there's obviously with rookies, there's lots of things to build on. You get a more athletic, more stronger and things like that. But I like his in-between game. I like his ability to play on and off the ball. I think the skill set is something that the Raptors are a little bit short in right now. So, increases the overall balance of your roster. And yeah, ultimately, if you're getting a player on his rookie scale contract who's much more ready to contribute right now, you get him for 4 years until 23 to age 26 season. Plus, after that, you're able to extend him with exclusive rights. I don't think that that's a bad thing. You're getting the majority. If the player works out, you're getting the most of his prime to a certain degree. And yes, there are other players, with maybe more talent and a longer timeline. You look at Graves, for example. He's a freshman and he's already doing all that. And he fits the style of player the Raptors have liked in the past. But I don't know. There's something about Sturtz, man. I think if you watch the whole game too, it's like hard to really not notice him. I know that maybe in combination highlight packages, everyone kind of looks roughly the same because you're mostly looking at a bunch of like makes or maybe a bunch of mistakes. But like if you just watch the balance of the game, like I think you come away pretty impressed with Bennett Stirtz. Plus, he's a fan favorite at Iowa, and I don't know. That's a school with a pretty rabid fan base. So those are the 2 guys out of the 4 that I really liked here. Otherwise, I think we'll be doing a little bit more draft coverage. Of course, the draft is about a month away. And so we'll have plenty of time to sort of go into other potential players. Look, I think there's a lot of ways to tackle this, right? There's like, we could look at which guard is the best for the Raptors at 19, which forward's the best for the Raptors at 19, which centers are the best for the Raptors at 19. We could do those styles of videos, but of course, we also want to bring on draft experts as well, get a chance to hear, actual detail level of insight rather than sort of just me looking at cursory YouTube videos. And ultimately we'll get to see. I mean, let me know too if there's guys that you specifically want for us to sort of like go more in depth and watch the film of as a group. Certainly there's lots of guys available at 19, so I'm curious to see that. But for now, that's who the Raptors have at 19 according to mock drafts, and we'll have to see if these mock drafts are true or not. So thanks everyone for listening. This has been the Hello and Welcome program, which is a presentation of ToonieBet, online sportsbook and casino, and we'll catch you later this week.